This episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast is brought to you by TherapyNotes. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Hello, I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, where we explore the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello folks, I'm Gordon Brewer, and this is episode number 246 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm so glad you're with me. Glad you're with me on this journey, and hope you'll take time to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. You know, one of the things about this medium or this particular way of doing things with podcasts, which is just absolutely taking off. I'm in a few circles where we talk podcasting and that sort of thing, but one of the things that I love about having started this podcast is the fact that I get to have really great conversations and get to meet new people through this medium. And today is one of those days. I got to have a conversation with Rosemary Scheppske. And Rosemary is, if you listen to last week's podcast episode, with Amanda Landry, Rosemary is part of Amanda's practice. And so in this particular episode, we just talk about how she moved from agency work into private practice working for a group, and how that was a good fit for her, and how it is continuing to be a good fit for her in developing her niche as a couples therapist, but also has a faith-based component with her practice, and just being able to have all of those kinds of conversations with people that want to work with a Christian counselor. And so anyway, we just talk about all of those kinds of things. So it's a fascinating conversation, and I think you can learn a lot from Rosemary. And, you know, one of the things about being in private practice is it gives us a lot of autonomy and ways of really doing the type of clinical work that we're passionate about. So again, not to give too much away, looking forward to you hearing from Rosemary in this particular interview. But before we get to that, I'd love for you to go check out the new online community that I've started for the Practice of Therapy, and it is housed on the Circle platform. And if you will go over to practiceoftherapy.com/community, I've set up a new free community for those of you that want to connect and just have more interaction. One of the things about being on Facebook is just that it is so cluttered anymore. And so I wanted to move the community off of that platform to really have more of, for lack of a better way to put it, more of an intimate experience that you don't necessarily always get in communities on Facebook. So anyway, go check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/community, and sign up for your free membership to that platform. And for those folks that might be in some of my courses, and also in particular the Practice Launch Club, I've got private spaces set up for those particular groups. So find out more about it by going to practiceoftherapy.com/community to learn more about that particular resource and that opportunity. And also, before we get to my conversation with Rosemary, I'd love for you to hear from our sponsor, the TherapyNotes. And you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes.
As your practice grows, the systems and processes you have in place will keep your practice running smoothly. That is why it is important to have an electronic health record system that is specific to mental health providers. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. They are who Gordon uses in his practice. And did I mention that they are one of the top-rated EHRs for mental health private practices? Their support is also second to none. Be sure to check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Be sure to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm happy for you to get to know today Rosemary Scheppske. So, Rosemary, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed?
Sure, thank you. I'm a therapist at a group practice in the Fort Lauderdale area, and I have been with that practice for about 2.5 years, pretty much throughout the entire pandemic. Before that, I was in community mental health counseling, and that's sort of where I started out, during grad school as a case manager. And then after I graduated, became a therapist. And so I worked throughout Palm Beach and Broward County as a case manager and therapist in homes with children and families. And then after licensure, I moved into the group practice that I'm with now, which is Caring Therapists of Broward, and I've had an amazing experience there. It's been really cool to have just a different setting and different experience. I have been working online and in person. So after, some restrictions of the pandemic kind of calmed down and we were able to return to the office, I've gotten to see clients in that setting. So that has been exciting, and it's been different to see my career kind of grow through the restrictions of the pandemic. It's been a little bit different than, I imagined, but it's been an awesome experience.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the things, it's funny because I had a conversation with the owner of your practice, Amanda, earlier this week. And, I guess one question I'm curious about is, as you were navigating out of agency work into private practice, what were some of the motivating factors for you, and how did you kind of decide maybe to join a group like Amanda's versus just striking out on your own? Because I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
Right. So I did consider looking into private practice. I knew that I wanted to transition out at some point, just for different reasons. Scheduling is difficult in community mental health. So you're working with children and families primarily in the home in the evenings, after school hours. And that really was such a learning experience, and I'm so grateful for it. But I knew that at some point I would want to transition into more of an office-based setting with different hours. And so I thought about private practice, I thought about group practice, and I knew that I was growing as a clinician, and I wanted to really focus on that and becoming really comfortable with therapy before I took on kind of the business building approach as well. I wanted to be able to focus more on therapy than honestly building a business right away. Mm-hmm. So I thought a group practice would be a great way to get my feet wet and to also have a team to be able to work with other clinicians kind of alongside them. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be totally out on my own. And so it's been a great experience for that reason. I would love, one day to open a private practice, but I've learned so much about business management, marketing, and networking, and also just really have enjoyed having a team to see, in between session, mm-hmm. In the hallway, in the office, for some camaraderie.
Yes. And I think that's what you say there, or what you kind of portray, what you're saying, as I've heard from a lot of folks, and that initially, particularly earlier on in your career, I think a lot of us really do like to hone our clinical skills and really kind of figure out what our niche is, so to speak. Yeah. Because one of the things about community mental health is you have to wear a lot of hats. Absolutely. And you have to deal with a lot of different issues, and you don't necessarily have the freedom to kind of pick your niche, so to speak, as you do
Absolutely.
in private practice. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my experience. Like I said, it was a great learning experience, and you're kind of exposed to a lot of different presentations and diagnoses and family systems all at once. And in my current position, I've been able to, like you said, kind of focus more on a niche or a specialty. And I probably wouldn't have discovered how much I love couples counseling if I hadn't joined this group, because there was sort of a need to fill. And so I started taking the Gottman Method trainings when I joined the practice, and was surprised with how much I fell in love with working with couples. I didn't even really know that was kind of a calling of mine until I started taking those trainings. And so I'm thankful for that discovery as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, being an LMFT myself, just kind of working with couples is kind of my niche as well. So what was it that drew you into kind of working with couples, and what was it that kind of grabbed hold of you in that sense?
Yeah. So I was introduced, my first exposure to couples therapy training, like I said, was the Gottman Method. So I did their level 1 training, and I was just really fascinated with the research. I was so impressed with how thorough it was and how effective that method was. And so I kept going with it. I started seeing couples, did the level 2 training, just continued to reinforce that I really felt like it was a good fit for my therapy style. And so as I continued to see couples, I saw it working, and I really enjoyed seeing couples. It's different than just having an individual client in the room. And so I think the way that I saw it work for people was really motivating and encouraging. I wanted to be able to bring that education to people. Some couples come to therapy knowing what method they've done their research, and they kind of know what to request. And some have never heard of it before. And so they're thankful to have tools right away, a lot of resources. And
yes,
I think they feel equipped with some practical tools to use.
Yes, yes. And I know the other thing that we were talking about at the beginning is that you've really kind of fallen in love with the Enneagram. Again, something too that I've really, through our mutual connection with Whitney Owens, it's something that I've really gotten to enjoy. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I actually did Whitney's Enneagram training a few months back. So I heard about the Enneagram originally from friends, probably back in 2015, 2016, and just found it interesting for personal use. It was kind of a hot topic, in churches and around friends. And so people were discovering it. And so I was familiar with it for a few years before I started using it in a clinical setting. And then I took her training, and I've introduced it to individual clients, but also couples as well. And it's been a good resource for people just to have, again, another tool just for language. So it gives us language around our motivations and why we do what we do, and highlights our strengths and our growth areas. So I found that individuals and couples actually have responded really well to it. And I have found it transformative and enlightening myself. So yeah, I also
I think
love that.
that for me as well. I just I know one of the things too that we're going to kind of transition into here is just kind of faith-based practices and that sort of thing. And as I've shared in previous episodes, part of one of the other hats I wear is I'm a clergy person in the Episcopal Church, and so. Last year during Lent, I really kind of took a deep dive into the Enneagram, and it was really enlightening of really looking at, again, my internal motivations and really looking at what is the healthiest version of my type, which I'm a 2 with a 3 wing. Curious as to what you are.
Yes. So I'm a type 1. And actually I mistyped earlier on. I was actually going to bring this up about what clients it's ideal to use with, because I've heard that the way that you can recognize your type is to think about what's been true of you for most of your life, especially in your 20s. And so a lot of my teens or young adults, they're still coming into their personality. So it's their behaviors and their motivations might not be fully shaped yet. And so I took this test when I was younger and typed as a 6 originally. And then after a couple of years, I retested, or I did some more research, and I realized I was a type 1. So there's some similarities between the two. But yeah, I landed on type 1.
Yes.
And I know I think Whitney shared in her training that she is as well.
Yes, she is. She is. So yeah, and that comes up a lot with my conversations with Whitney. Whitney and I communicate regularly. So, but yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And I think going back to what you were talking about and doing couples work, it's really a great tool with that, in that, particularly with using kind of an emotionally focused approach, which the Gottman Method is an emotionally focused approach, and really getting people to understand each other's in a couple, their internal world. And, in my work with couples, one of the things that I try to get across to them is that a sign of a healthy relationship is when two people can understand each other's internal worlds and then treat that with kindness and compassion. And I think the Enneagram allows that, gives people a good tool for that. Yeah.
I think it works really well, the Enneagram, in conjunction with the Gottman Method, because the Gottman Method does talk a lot about learning your partner's internal world through love maps. And
yes.
and the Enneagram talks about understanding internal motivations. And so I've seen couples who have a lot of differences, they'll get really frustrated with each other, or they're not seeing eye to eye. And once they learn that they just have different lenses through which they're seeing the world, like you said, they can be compassionate to that person's perspective, their partner's perspective, and come to an agreement. And so it stops being about who's right or wrong, and more about just recognizing that there's two different lenses.
Yes. The important part of that kind of work is especially. Yeah. Yeah. So I know the other thing I know that you're kind of a motivator for you is just you're with your faith and how that integrates with your practice. You want to say more about that?
Right. Yeah. So that's another topic that I'm really passionate about in my clinical work as well. So I will integrate Christian counseling as much as the client wants to. Like I said, with the Gottman Method and with couples counseling, some people come in requesting that. Some people come in requesting the Gottman Method, or they'll come in requesting Christian counseling because I'll let people know, online that I'm a Christian counselor. And so they'll come in asking for that. Or sometimes people don't even know, and they'll come into therapy and they'll start talking about their culture, their spirituality, and they'll start sharing about what role that plays in their life. And so I'm able to integrate it to the level that it's relevant to that client. And so I am really passionate about that. I enjoy being able to bring that into the room if it's beneficial to the client. I've actually found recently, and different clients have different levels of integration with Christian counseling. Some are even leaning more toward the biblical counseling side, where they really appreciate Christian books and scripture being brought into therapy. And so I've noticed that it actually works really well with the ideas of CBT, because clients who might be struggling with anxiety or low self-esteem, and they have these automatic negative thoughts about themselves or the world or even God, if they're a spiritual person, we're able to take some truths that they believe in scripture and challenge those negative thoughts with encouraging, truthful thoughts and scriptures. And that really helps to transform their perspective.
Right. Yeah. I think it's, and that's been my experience as well. In many ways, as I tell my clients when I do an intake with them, is that I don't have a religious agenda with my therapy. But if those are things that they want to talk about or they want to integrate in their work, I'm happy to do that and have a lot of fun with those kinds of things as well. So, so I think that's one of the things that, and I know Whitney and I have had this conversation several times, is that, I think when people are seeking that, to be able to offer that as an option just gives them more room to grow, because it gives them a context to which they are is very much a part of their values and that sort of thing. And it's as you know, I'm sure, Rosemary, it's never about trying to convert someone or trying to get them to change their mind about their spirituality or what other beliefs or that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And different clients are at different levels and perspectives of spirituality. And so, when they come in and that's something that they want to integrate and it's something that's a part of their value system, like you said, it's just another way for them to grow.
Right. Yeah. So what's got you excited about your practice and your work right now?
Yeah. Well, I would say just growing in those three areas, really being able to incorporate my passions with Christian counseling, with the Enneagram. I'm excited to be using that more and more in therapy. Like I said, I was familiar with it on a more personal level, and being able to integrate it now with clients has been really fun. And watching them click with it has been exciting. A lot of clients have gotten the feedback of, wow, this is so accurate, or I've never felt so validated in this way, or I shared this with my partner and they're going to take it too, and they're really excited to learn. And or the partner will read about the client's Enneagram type, and they'll say, wow, that makes a lot of sense, I understand you more now. And so I think just watching people find something that clicks with them and find something that validates them so well is cool. And it's transforming their relationships and the way that they view themselves. So I love to see that with clients. I love to see them get excited about a new perspective and the potential for growth there. With the Enneagram, we talk a lot about levels of development. So I like to tell clients there's no good or bad number. There's no, better number than any other type. But you can just become aware and healthy in your Enneagram type. And so we'll talk about those levels of development and what makes them feel secure versus what makes them feel stressed, and how they go to their stress and their security numbers in different times. So it really provides a lot of, I would say, optimism and encouragement for them.
Sure. Yeah. So what would you say you would want people to know about private practice and why it's a good thing?
Yeah. I think my experience has been just having, like I said earlier, having a team has been awesome. Because when I was in community mental health, there's a team there. You're obviously all, you're going out into the community to see your different clients. And so the majority of your day you're spending with your clients, truly, but then there is a team there as well. And so I think if you can connect yourself with other clinicians, even if you are in private practice, you're not necessarily in group practice. I was actually at a networking event this morning and I saw some familiar faces in the community. And so it's been really important for me to connect with other clinicians in the area. I enjoy working with clients so much, but then it's also just a different conversation to meet with other clinicians and get encouragement. It's great for, learning about what other people are doing and what their specialties are and being able to work together and collaborate together. So that's been really important to me. I think going into grad school and going into this field, I thought a lot about therapy and the kind of traditional therapy room with you and your client and how that would go. But I hadn't thought so much about what the community aspect of it would look like, what the team aspect would look like. And so that's been a pleasant surprise as well. And I would say just try to stay connected to anybody, who's going out into private practice or joining a group practice. It's a great supportive environment.
Yeah. And that's such an important piece. And I guess the word that stands out for me and what you're saying is community. And that one of the things that I think everyone needs is a community of other practitioners that they can bounce stuff off of. And excuse me. We'll cut that part out. But the one thing that stands out most for me, Rosemary, that you're saying is that community is an important piece in being in private practice, and particularly, I think, in our fields as professionals, because people are bringing to us very heavy stuff, and we need to have a way of being able to process that within the right setting, whether it's through, even though we're licensed and we might not necessarily need supervision technically, I think we still need that kind of being able to have that feedback. And I know in my own practice, that's something that we really kind of cherish with each other, is being able to talk about our cases with each other and some of the things that we're running into and how it's affecting us emotionally and all of that sort of thing. And
right. I completely agree. Yeah. I mean, again, in community mental health, when I was doing supervision there, there's lots of team meetings and checking in with people. And after licensure, once there wasn't kind of a requirement for supervision, I realized, I still want to have a collaborative approach with people. I still want to be able to, like you said, bounce ideas off of people and just kind of feel filled up with my peers and feel encouraged and supported. And like I have people to lean on professionally. Mm-hmm. So that's been really important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think the kind of the bottom line is that we're all social creatures, and we need, whether we're introverted or extroverted, we still need other people, and we need to be able to make those connections. And, that's a kind of coming full circle around to doing couples work. That's what it's about, is about helping people make those close connections, those intimate connections that are just bring meaning to our life. And again, that's the spiritual element as well. Just thinking about that, we need to have things that bring meaning in our life in order to be whole and full and healthy.
I was just listening to a podcast actually that was talking about how relationships can have an impact on our physical health. And with Dr. Caroline Leaf, I enjoy listening to too. She was talking about, there was this study done with couples, and those that were able to resolve conflict quicker, they were able to also recover from physical ailments quicker. And so it was all about how the quality of our relationships impacts our physical health, and how it's not actually, it's not this invisible thing that doesn't matter. It actually makes a difference in our bodies and our minds. So
absolutely. Yeah. Most of the stress we endure in life has to do with other people. So,
well, and like you said, we're social creatures. We're always, engaging with other people in one way or another. So it's important to make sure that those relationships are healthy and supportive. Yeah.
Sure. Well, Rosemary, I want to be respectful of your time. What sort of parting thoughts might you have for folks?
Oh, wow. Well, first, I just want to thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking about these ideas, these kind of corners of therapy that we've been talking about today. So I appreciate you just having a space for us to chat about that. And I will say I was actually a little bit nervous about doing this podcast today because it's my first podcast interview, fun fact. And so I'm trying to take a little bit of my own advice, because something that, clients will even talk about is just doing hard things and doing things outside of your comfort zone and, kind of branching out. And so I guess that's my encouragement to people is try new things.
I'm glad you were on this for your first time, but one little inside secret about this, one of the things I love about doing podcasts is you get to, particularly at this format, with the interview format, you get to have really good conversations with people. But, for any other therapists out there that might be shy about coming on a podcast, it's no different than sitting in a therapy room with someone and having a conversation.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I do a lot of telehealth anyway, so it's like having another conversation. So I appreciate that. And it's great to try new things.
Sure. So Rosemary, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah. So like I said, the practice that I'm with is called Caring Therapists. So you can find us online there. And I have a profile on the website that explains about what I do and what clients I see. I'm also on Instagram, Therapy with Rosemary. And so those are kind of the two main places I would say.
Well, thanks, Rosemary, and look forward to hopefully having you on again. Well, big thanks to Rosemary for being on the podcast. And I'm really grateful to her for being vulnerable and kind of sharing her story. And that's, as I said at the beginning, one of the things I love about doing this podcast is being able to hear people's stories and how they've navigated from particularly being in agency work into private practice. And there are a lot of different avenues for doing that. And as you heard from Rosemary, her decision to go to work for a larger group practice has been a great fit for her, but also gives her the autonomy around the niche that she wanted to create for herself and the areas that she wanted to focus in clinically. And so that's something good to know, I think, as you think about going into private practice. A lot of different avenues for that. Having your own private practice or being in business as a solo practitioner isn't for everyone. And for some people, like Rosemary, being part of a larger group practice is a great way to kind of accomplish those same goals or those same kind of outcomes as far as having the autonomy and being able to focus on the kind of niches that you want to focus on. So again, thanks to Rosemary. And be sure and check the show notes here for links to her things and being able to find out more about her. And hope to have more people just like this on the podcast. And I will mention here, if you're interested in being on the podcast, I'd love for you to apply. And you can go to practiceoftherapy.com/podcast. And there's an application link there, and you can apply to be on the podcast. Not everybody gets on the podcast, so if you feel like you've got something to contribute to this space, I invite you to apply and be a guest. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning, be sure and check out this new community that I've got launching. It's a free community called the Practice of Therapy Community, and it's going to be it's already housed on the Circle platform, and you can get to that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/community, and that way you can get involved in that and find out more about it. So that's it, folks. Big thanks to our sponsor, TherapyNotes, and you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, to try them out for 2 months for free. As I've said before, they're who I use in my practice, and absolutely feel like they're one of those necessary tools for my practice. So take care, folks. Take time to follow us wherever you're listening to your podcast, and we'll be back with you next week for another great episode. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.